Good afternoon and welcome to this month's Humpday Hangout with Fire Engineering and the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. I'm Brian Zaitz, the host for the show and president of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. Before we get started today, I just want to give a quick shout out to FDIC. It's going to be here before you know it. It's the first week of April. So make sure that you're registering for that now. It's crazy that some of the hot classes have already sold out, but that's not uncommon. And before you know it, they'll all be sold out. So if you have not signed up for FDIC to get up there to Indianapolis in April, make sure you get on that right away. Also, make sure you get on to fireengineering.com and firefighter.nation.com, both great websites with a ton of information for the relevance of the fire service. And we're actually going to talk about some of that today with a contributing photographer as did a lot for fire engineering here recently and kind of his story and some of that stuff. So for those two big things. So before we get started, we'll kind of do some introductions. I got a familiar face here, Damon and Dave Dubowski. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Good morning, folks. Damon Simmons, Oakland Fire. Okay, I should say good afternoon, depending on where you are in the United States or the world for that matter. Looking forward to a great discussion today.
Perfect. We got Dave Dubowski.
Hi, everybody. Brian Zaitz was nice enough to have me on today, so I sure do appreciate that, Brian. I'm an engine company captain in St. Louis County on the north side, also with the Muddy River Fools in St. Louis, as well as the secretary with the Fools International.
Nice. And all around great guy, right? So we can't forget that. All around great guy. So today we're going to talk about photography, right? And so and how photos are used to preserve our history, to talk about, some of the things that have come before us, as well as also how photos can enhance our training because we are the ISFSI. So Dave, why don't you tell us kind of a little bit about your history of photography and how you kind of got started, taking pictures of the fire service?
Well, looking back, I got to blame my dad for all this. My dad was a World War II veteran, and he actually had a camera, believe it or not. Very few people in the military had cameras back then. He was in the Army. He'd landed in North Africa and made it up to Italy and captured that whole journey with a camera. It's some fabulous history. So I just remember as a kid, my dad always having a camera, and then I kind of fell into it. I had a little Kodak 110, but I wasn't involved with the fire department. I was taking pictures of, buildings and trains and everything else. And then once I got onto the fire department, I started volunteering in about 1984. I kind of combined the two with my love of the fire service as well as my love of photography.
That's awesome. So for those that don't know, so Dave and I work pretty close to each other. So we have a pretty good relationship with each other, but Dave has been able to present to our county academy a lot of the history of the St. Louis Fire Service, some of the pictures that you've archived and things like that. Where did you find all those? Like, where were your resources? Because obviously I know you didn't. You're old, but you're not that old to take all those pictures. So,
yeah, it's out there. Our history is out there. It just takes dedicated individuals to find it. And but if you have a box of photos sitting in your basement, that really isn't doing anybody any good. And a lot of guys have that. They don't want to share their stuff. They want to keep it, to themselves for whatever reasons. Are they just afraid of, well, it's my stuff and I don't want to take a chance of it loaning out and then being gone. But to me, these photos have become history, and history to me is all about sharing. So I guess this whole history thing with me kind of goes back to grade school. I had a history teacher that I loved, Mr. Gaylor. Went into high school, had another history teacher there, Miss Ross, and that kind of blossomed into my love of history. And looking back, those were two big influential individuals for me. As I got into fire service, my early years, I really didn't care much about the fire service history. I didn't know a lot about the fire service history. I wish I would have spent a lot more time with those old timers back in my early days, talking to them and getting their stories, but I didn't. And then a group of firefighters opened a fire museum at a local mall here. It was called the First Due Fire Museum. And I would volunteer out there a couple nights a month. And there was a slow night one night, and I was looking around, and there was a cool old picture hanging on the wall. It was about 10 old volunteers in an old rig. And I took the picture off the wall, and lo and behold, on the back side, it had the names of everybody that was standing in that picture. That picture was taken probably in the 1920s. And that's kind of what started this whole project of preserving history for our future generations of firefighters. If that picture was out there, I knew there had to be more. And I just started digging, and been digging ever since.
That's crazy. Yeah, you got some pictures. I mean, it's incredible. Why do you think that it maybe, I don't want to say generational because I know that's not the right thing. Where do you think we lost some of our fire? Because we always say tradition, right? Like the fire service is big, like, hey, we'll hold the tradition, with our helmets and our gear and the things we do and the ceremonies and things like that. Where did the history aspect of that get lost, do you think?
Well, I don't blame the new generation in no way, because they don't know. So who's the fault on them? Is it on us? We're the ones that have to continually pass on those stories and all the traditions that go along with the fire service to the next generation of firefighters. And that was one huge thing that drew me to the Fools International. You mentioned the Fire Academy class. What a huge opportunity. Dean Everett, who's the boss out of the St. Louis County Fire Academy, approached us about 5 years ago and said, hey, what about a couple guys from Muddy River Fools coming to teach history to the recruit class? Nobody was doing that. So all 3 recruit classes every year, myself and my buddy Zach Credo from up at Florissant Fire, we go in and give a 2-hour class. It's a brief class, but it's something. And Zach, the first hour, teaches the history of the American Fire Service, sprinklers, historical fires, Dalmatians, tiller trucks. And then the second half is my turn, and I kind of gear in on the history of the fire service in St. Louis County.
Well, to your point of the history, I think it's great that, we think of the academies, right? And sometimes we just think it's so academia, right? Like, hey, it's got to be this, like we got to get the checks that, we meet the standards, but there's also that aspect of ensuring that when they come to the job, they understand the culture that we have for our region. And, it's recent. There's that brand new book, Lieb and Goldfeder did on the 30 fires everybody must know, every firefighter must know. And I thought to myself, I'm like, what a great idea for a book, because there's, how many guys on the job now that, like, you mentioned, an incident and they're just like, man, I've never heard of that, or what are you talking about with that? Or if you said the Worcester 6, they'd be like, where's even Worcester at,
Sure,
and
sure.
so, those incidents and those events, and then how the photography, really captures those and brings them to life for the people so they can really relate to them.
Well, that's it. I thought about that, about what happens if I show up to class one time and my first drive doesn't work, and then my second drive fails. I'm up there for an hour or two telling stories, which is fine, but the photos is what makes the class, and for the students to see, photos of their ancestors, basically, because even if these guys weren't on the same department, our firefighter ancestors, whether they were from Los Angeles or New York, those are the guys that paved the way for us.
No, I totally agree. And it's, Dave already knows the story, but I didn't realize until I'd already been on the job for a little bit that my great grandfather was a volunteer firefighter in a neighboring town to where I work now. And just ironic, I came across some old photos and some memorabilia of his, and didn't even know really. And so, it just shows that you don't even know sometimes what you don't know. But if you do a little digging, as Dave says, and try to find a little bit, man, it really is pretty impressive. So, so we have Dave on today. Dave recently, as everyone knows, the horrendous wildfires that occurred in LA area last month now. Dave was out there doing some fire photojournalism, if you will, along with another gentleman and a couple of people. And so Dave was able to capture a lot of what happened. And so we have some of those pictures we're going to show. Dave's going to tell us, Dave, kind of how did this all transpire for you to get out there?
I got a text from a buddy of mine. He's up in New England. He's a firefighter up there. I'm a guy with a camera. I'm in no form. I've been taking pictures for 40 years at the fire department. But I'm just a guy with a camera. My buddy John, he's a professional photojournalist as well as being on the job. And he follows what goes on across the country. And he shot me a text the Saturday before the fires broke out in California. and it was short and sweet. And it was like, hey, major Santa Ana winds coming to the Los Angeles area. And I texted back right away, and I said, man, you going? And he said, give me a call. And that was kind of how it all got started. John's been out there several times on some of the big events that have happened. There's one of the photos right there. That was day 2 over in Altadena. Just fire after fire. It was, and it wasn't a forest fire. This was the wildland urban interface fire, to where basically where this is a Bank of America fully involved. You can see the buildings next door had already burned down. This was Wednesday afternoon. This was 10 minutes from the Rose Bowl. This was a big suburban metropolitan area, like so many of us work in. And this whole town just burned up. The winds kicked in the night before. And this was all started from the Eaton fire. And just imagine, your busiest commercial road in your town, every building on fire. And that's what these guys had in this photo here.
That's just crazy. Yeah, and like you said, the opportunity to capture those images for us and the rest of the country to see, because it's hard for the closest thing I can remember, which is terrible, is the Ferguson the event and all the burning of buildings up there. And I know that's not even in comparison to this, but to see, like you said, what starts out as a wildland fire, just becomes a wildfire across a community of commercial buildings and structures is just wild to visualize and see.
Yeah, this was nothing like I'd ever experienced living here in St. Louis. We've had our share of big fires in the city and the county where we work, and I've been to New York and seen those guys. I've been to Chicago plenty of times. About 10 years ago, it was my birthday, and myself and a buddy of mine went out there, and we got to ride with Chief Castros for a couple days up in Sac Metro, spent a day with a Cal Fire battalion chief, but there were no fires that week. We had a blast. We met some great brothers and sisters, went to a Cardinals game against the Giants in San Francisco, but there were no fires. And it's always been on my bucket list just to see what these guys do. I mean, the enormity of it. This is the birthplace of the ICS that we use everywhere now, was developed from these wildland fires. And I've always been intrigued on it. And it's kind of always been on my bucket list. And when John called, I checked with my wife right away, and she knew I wanted to go and take a couple of days off of work. And I was on my way. And I'm so glad I went. Had no idea that this would be one of the most historical, largest fires in the history of our country.
So when you guys got out there, just maybe a couple of these pictures. What are we looking at here? Like when you saw these other trucks showing up, I mean, from all across, essentially all across the country for that matter, I mean, what was your initial thought?
Well, just to give you some timing, I guess, as we were flying, myself, I was coming in from St. Louis, so I was on the plane by myself. I landed about 12:10, and just about noon as we were flying into LAX, I overheard some people on the plane saying fire, a big fire. I wasn't paying attention. I was reading, and I looked out the window and saw this huge column of smoke. I had no idea what it was. Turns out that was the Palisades fire had just begun about 90 minutes earlier. So talk about timing. My plane landed 90 minutes after the Pacific Palisades fire started. My buddy John picked me up at the airport. We had the rental car going, and we were off on our way up to the Pacific Palisades. And I don't know, it's that day there was so much going on. I mean, it was level 2 hurricane winds. And I'm no wildland expert by any means. And I was there to photograph this. And what these guys did and what I saw was just incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy to see, like you said. I mean, to be able to look back, I'm sure for these, these departments to have these photos or access to these photos through fire engineering now, to just, capture that for their own history, right? I mean, just to,
Sure.
for them to go back. So here we see this is, I mean, literally we're watching guys with wildland gear on fighting a structure fire.
Yeah, I didn't see anybody in structural gear. It was, looking back, it's kind of funny. But man, there was just so much going on, and everybody had their wildland gear and their backpacks. And I think I saw one, I mean, these were hundreds and thousands of structure fires burning. And I think the whole time I saw one guy with the SCBA on. It was a pretty tight area where they were trying to keep one apartment complex burning down another apartment complex. But the whole time, this is your typical photo. This was a fully involved building. That's probably a forestry line there. It's not what you expected to see. Fully involved apartment complexes aren't fought with booster lines. But I saw that because there was no water. The water system had failed, and engine companies were working off a 500-gallon booster tank.
That's just crazy. Absolutely. Did you, so like any personal interactions that you had out there or anything that, stand out in your mind?
Met so many great people, whether it was civilians or our day one up in the Pacific Palisades. We met this wonderful retired couple. They'd lived in the same home for about 35 years. We came as photographers, but at the end of the day, we were firefighters. John asked them if they had garden hoses. So we stretched the 2 green lines and just started squirting everything down. End of the day, those 2 green lines were no match for the Palisades fire. And then others, here's a picture of just, 3 or 4 houses burning. And these guys were just trying to keep it from this last house on the block, as well as the pretty nice Alfa Romeo sitting there in the driveway. Walking down the street, with a house fully involved. I just still remember this beautiful, tall, hot-looking chick standing on the sidewalk, just bawling her eyes out. And I said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And all she did was point across the street and said, "That's my house." And the house was gone.
Wow.
And then our hotel, we stayed at a hotel over in Burbank. And by day 2, you started noticing that the hotel was full. Well, as you start overhearing, it's all the people that had lost everything, and they were staying at the hotel now. I also got to meet a lot of great firefighters. I've never had a fancy business card, but now being on the e-board with the international, they gave me a stack of business cards, and I'm glad I had some because I'd see some of these brothers and sisters just doing what they do so well, and I'd say, "Hey, man, I know you're busy, but here's my card." And so, and they all contacted me, and I sent them out these photos, and they were all very appreciative, and I loved hearing their stories on what they did.
So how much of that is, so I think, that's the other aspect of this too, right? Like you've got all these photos, but then they kind of go back and talk to the actual, the firefighters or people that lived in that time, to get the story of, to really bring it full circle.
Yeah, it's amazing. And like I said, I have no idea how they operate out there. The whole time I was there, I never heard one firefighter complain. Wouldn't you love that at your own department? We all would. But you talk to these brothers and sisters, and they say, "Yeah, we just drove here, 8, 9 hours, and we've been working on the line 36 hours straight." And I tell them I'm from St. Louis, and, "Well, what are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm here to see what you guys do so well." And struck up a lot of great conversations. But it was cool hearing their stories, and I've kept in touch with several of them. The one photo that you were scrolling through was a big dude with a big burly mustache. He just looked like a wildland firefighter. Well, next thing you know, he tells me he's a historian and he loves photography. I'm like,
Oh,
buddy,
wow.
that's I mean, what a small world. So hearing their stories, and for me, like I said, I took about 3,000 photos out there, but they're not doing anything, anybody any good, just sitting on my computer. So I'm so thankful. Fire engineering, was able to get a lot of these photos out there, and we're able to share them.
No, I think it's amazing because, we see what we see either through the news or those things, but to see it from the line where you were at, and then to take those images and then, like you said, to correlate the stories, to have those firefighters then be able to contact you and say, "Hey, listen, that was my company, right? That was my company with that hand line," and then really say, "Hey, listen, what were your, conditions like?" And because I just, in my head, you hear these things, right? Like, category 2 hurricane winds, with a fire. Like I just can't wrap my head around what that situation looks like. And then to that point too, when I was talking to Demon's in Oakland, California, and he's like, yeah, we got trucks going down there.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking like that's 7 hours away.
Yeah.
But that's not an uncommon event in California, right? Like they just, when I heard, for me, it just, again, rattles my brain because, I hear they ask for 50 strike teams of engines, we need 250 engines. Like, I don't even know if in Missouri we could get 250 engines, it's just the resources and the capabilities and they're to your point, like, they just do it so well out there. That's pretty impressive. Was there ever any times where you thought like, man, this is pretty sketchy what we got going on? Like,
yeah, just once.
Okay.
Day one, after the nice retired couple had left, and John said, "Okay, it's time to go." We dropped our lines, and he said, "Well, we head out to the middle of the street. The middle of the street's our safe place." And we had wildland gear. He said, "You got to bring a set of wildland gear." And I'm like, "Dude, I work in St. Louis County. We don't have wildland gear." So with the help of a couple people, I was able to get a whole set. So we had our cameras, but we also were covered head to toe, Nomex hoods and helmets and goggles and everything. And everybody's seen the footage out there of just the wind and the embers, and it was you couldn't have survived. But luckily we were protected. But it turned dark. It was 3 or 4 in the afternoon that day one. Everybody had evacuated, and we were up in this neighborhood. And the Los Angeles Fire Department was just overwhelmed. We watched this whole neighborhood burn, and we just didn't see one rig up there on this street. No fault of theirs. I mean, they had thousands, by this time they probably had hundreds, if not 1,000 structures going. The folks on this street just didn't get lucky enough to have fire engines over on their street. So it was me and John up there. And at one point I said to John, I said, "What's that noise?" He said, "That's the fire." And it really did sound like a freight train.
Wow.
And our helmets blew off. I remember seeing one ember. It looked like the size of a mattress blowing our heads. And we definitely, the safety folks out there aren't going to like this, but I got a good case of smoke inhalation that night, which it's so ironic that I'm so good, back at the firehouse with, wearing SCBA and everything, but not that night. And man, I had a terrible headache. But we were there, and we had that was the only time though, right when I heard that freight train. But John was pretty well versed in what was going on, and I stuck by him. But that was the only time. The rest of the times, I never felt in danger in any way. And even at that time, it was just a fleeting moment for a minute. And by that time, it was time to get the camera back out and start capturing some more images. As you see the flag there, that was one.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe we could just scroll through a couple of these. You can tell us what we're looking at and what we got going on here.
Yeah, this is day one. We're coming down from the Palisades. John was starting.
This is during the day.
Yeah, this was late afternoon.
Wow.
And everything was on fire, Brian. Structures, cars in the street, vegetation everywhere. And but utility poles as well. So John's fear at this point was the utility poles coming down and kind of blocking our escape route. So we started making our way down through the Palisades, and at one street corner there was structures burning on every corner. So I got out to snap pictures of those, and I looked over to the left, and I saw the flag flying there. And man, it was a good catch to see that beautiful American flag still flying. And it's one of my favorite images from the whole week.
That's crazy. It's amazing to see that, and then how dark that is. What we got here? This is
Kern County. Yeah, they're up around Bakersfield. They came down a couple hours. They sent a couple strike teams down. This fellow was filling up. This was on Lake Avenue. They were at a entire apartment complex that was on fire. Imagine, your biggest apartment complex in your town, and every building was on fire. That's what these guys were on. He was driving down the street to find a plug, and he was filling up his 750 booster tank or whatever he had, and he was going back to the fully involved apartment complex to dump 750 gallons on it.
Wow. Yeah, and you see there's another truck behind it there.
Yeah. Everybody was doing the same thing.
Yeah, just trying to fill up and go.
Find
And do their
find a hydrant and go to work.
crazy.
Yeah, that's day one. That's right after we got there. That's up at the top of the Palisades. We were on a street called Rimmer Avenue, and man, it was peaceful. We were just out back with our cameras, talking to the neighbors, and a lot of folks had left already, but a lot of other folks were still hanging out and talking and making conversation. And the fire wasn't coming our way; it was on the horizon. It was across the canyon. You could see some houses across the canyon burning. The smoke was going, from the right to the left out to the ocean. But it wasn't coming our way when we got there. And then things really started to turn, and the fire just really blew up and started heading in several different directions.
What's your distance, you think, here, Dave?
Boy, I've been looking at these photos and studying them so much. I don't know, Brian, to tell you the truth. It was across the canyon, but like I say, it seemed a long way away.
Sure.
I couldn't tell you in miles or anything like that,
Gotcha. That's wild.
And structure fires everywhere. I went out there to take a trip to see wildland fires, and this became a whole city
Fire.
burning down. And here's just this fellow was the firefighter on Quint 166 with the LA County Fire Department, and these guys were just going from fire to fire, and he was setting up in an apartment building complex and getting his pipe ready.
That's wild.
Yeah, and that's back to day one. You could just see the heat under that fire. You could see the flames, but look over to the left, just the amount of heat there. If you look real close, kind of down on the hill, probably about 4 or 5 o'clock, you can see some little spot fires. I learned about spotting. Spotting's when the embers and the fire just blow out, and they were saying that they were spotting up to about a half a mile to a mile out in front of this fire.
It's amazing to see, to your point, the size of the embers that were flying. Because in Missouri, right? Like we think leaf litter, we sometimes get some, few acres, few hundred acres maybe here and there. But our embers are, at best maybe the size of a basketball, at best. And to hear the size of some of these embers that were flying is insane.
Oh, it is. And this fire just took these embers, and the winds kept going stronger. Besides the regular, not regular, but unprecedented hurricane force winds, this fire was making its own weather. So you had all that, and these fires were up in the mountains, and then it just was dumping all these embers on top of these communities that surrounded these hills.
So devastating.
Yeah, and here's a first for me. I'd never seen a helicopter drop, and you look at helicopter drops, you think they're putting out forest fires. He was dumping on a commercial building. This was one of the areas up in the Eaton fire in Altadena, and it was a commercial building fully involved and no water in that area. So LA County helicopters were coming in making water drops on commercial building fires.
Maybe we get a couple helicopters here in the St. Louis area for ourselves.
These guys were good.
Yeah.
You just watch them. They'd circle a couple times. I think on some of the helicopters, you'd hear a small siren go off, and that would let everybody know that the drop was about to come. Watching some of the fixed wing airplanes, you'd have a small lead plane. They'd circle a couple times with the big DC-10 or whatever following them. The lead plane would set off a little smoke bomb or whatever, release a little bit of smoke, and that would tell the big plane where he needed to drop his load.
That's insane. The piloting of those aircraft's amazing.
Oh my gosh, yes. They're masters at what they do. And yeah, this is looking from our folks' backyard there. This is the Temescal Canyon overlooking, and it's just, like I said, it was just so peaceful. It was across the canyon, and we just watched the fire grow and the smoke blow. Just, your typical structure fire over in Altadena that day. This was a LA County engine company, and he was flowing his deck gun. I think this guy was being fed by a Bureau of Land Management tender. And what do we call them in St. Louis, Missouri? We call them tankers. Well,
Yeah.
I was corrected pretty quick. No, that's a tender, young man.
Mhm.
So they were being fed by a Bureau of Land Management tender. And, whether that tender had 4,000 or 5,000 gallons on it, when he was done, so was the deck gun.
It's pretty amazing to see that, the interoperability, which is, fantastic, just in the fire service alone, but especially in areas like that where, Bureau of Land Management tender supplying a LA County truck for structure protection, structure fire extinguishment,
If anybody is interested in any of this stuff and to see how good these guys are, it's on YouTube. You can just type in, Pacific Palisades radio traffic.
Yeah.
And some guy put together, I think it's like the first, 12 hours of the fires out there on Tuesday. And he's condensed it down to about 3 hours. And it's just fascinating. It's from the first helicopter report of what goes on, when the fire started, to just all the incident command and everything that was going on. And man, these guys are smooth. They, you never heard anybody getting excited on the radios. You never heard anybody, yelling too much. It was calm, cool, and collect the whole time on the radios, it seemed like.
Yeah. Kudos that somebody put on their Facebook feed. Definitely our thoughts and prayers to everybody out there. The fires are starting to get under control out there, but California, Damon unfortunately had to get off the call or the show here today. But being from Oakland, he attested that definitely a challenging area to be a firefighter. He's like, we're getting ready to have some major rains and mudslide season, and of course earthquakes are always in the back of their head, and so
Sure.
Definitely a challenging environment to operate in. So kudos to all those firefighters from essentially the California first, but all that came to assist and provide aid. And that's what the fire service is all about, right? Everybody comes to help everybody else out. So
absolutely. And California, they master the mutual aid program. No doubt about it. Like you mentioned earlier, give me 50 strike teams without the drop of a dime,
Yeah.
If you could back up for a minute, that's Andy. He was one of the fellows I was talking to at the Eaton Fire with Altadena. And just a good guy, but man, if that doesn't look like a wildland firefighter, I don't know what is. But he was the fellow I met that was a big history buff like myself, and was a photographer as well.
Gotcha. Awesome. There's another structure.
Yeah, just the structure stretching the forestry line and doing their best. They had no, there was no attempt to put that fire out. They were just knocking it down and going around the corner to the next one. And that's what I did. I'd snap a couple pictures, walk down a couple houses and catch another company operating off their booster line, or walk around the corner and see another huge black column of smoke. And this was day two. This was, this wasn't day one. This was day two over in Altadena, and there was still a lot of fires going on.
Wow.
Yeah, this is one of those apocalyptic pictures. This looks like something you could see in Beirut, or a World War II, picture over in Germany or something. Just complete devastation with the fire burning, and these guys stretching a line. See a chimney back there. One of the greatest comments I heard about the fire out there was all these chimneys were standing, and somebody commented they look like a bunch of tombstones.
Wow.
And they did.
It's amazing to see the devastation. Like you said, even in this picture here, we see structure fires, and, we've all been on structure fires that, do significant damage, but there's still some frame of a building left. And then you look at these, to your point, with the tombstones, there's nothing left.
No, absolutely. And once again, that last picture you showed, where they were protecting, I couldn't tell you if they saved that place or not. These guys, we're doing an incredible job. They were from Riverside County, and if you look on the far right there, it's an orange tree, and the orange tree was still intact. It was California beauty, but everything around it was burned. You could see the folks tried to have their garden hose out there, but they probably did something early on, but there was no water at this time. So whether this house was able to be protected, I don't know, because, like I said, I'd snap a few pictures, go on to the next one.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's your apocalyptic picture,
Right.
with the tombstones, the chimneys, and the cars burned out, and just the vegetation that's burned up, and in the background, there's a 2-story house still burning good.
Oh, I do see that now.
Yep.
I literally thought that was the sun when I first saw it.
Oh, yeah. No, that's another structure fire.
Structure fire. Wow. Yeah, that took me by surprise. Crazy, crazy. So Dave, incredible job, grabbing those photos and capturing that part of history for, the American Fire Service for years to come and things like that. What advice do you give to the firefighters, with their history and just with their own department, right? Like, here I am at, XYZ Fire Department, Fire District, wherever across USA, how important is it that they know the history of their department and the history of their area and the fire service as a whole?
Yeah, it's to me it's fascinating, but I'm a guy that's loved history forever. Not everybody has that same passion for history like I do, but it's out there, and it's really our responsibility as firefighters to pass that on. We all want to ride on the red fire trucks and have the cool helmets and all these traditions that we have, but where did they come from? You get a brand new kid on the rig. Why is the fire truck red? Why is there a green and red light out in front? Out in front of the station. Why is there a fire pole? Where did that come from? It's probably your responsibility to be able to tell that kid what all that history is about. Because if you don't have the answer, he's probably not going to care. And then when he gets on the job for a while, and the next kid asks him about all those things, he's not going to know the answer either. So it is all of our responsibility to do that and to keep passing the torch on. And it's out there. There's this with the internet now, man. There's just so much. One of the sites I use a lot is a site called newspapers.com. And it's like a $60 subscription or whatever. But to me, it's invaluable. And you could type in Kirkwood Fire Department and find articles from 100 years ago about the Kirkwood Fire Department on there. And everybody can do that with their departments too. You just got to have that one person on your job that's passionate. And if you got one person that's passionate about this history, all of a sudden you're going to have two. All of a sudden you're going to have three. So for the chiefs out there, I'd find that whether it's a veteran that's been on for a while that is still really into the job, or that young kid that asks a lot of questions and say, hey man, why don't you do a project about our history on the fire department? There's several departments here in St. Louis, and I'm sure there are across the country, that part of their probationary period, part of their, when they start on the job, part of that is to learn about the history of, their department they're about to work for. And I also, kids ask me, hey, I'm going over to the XYZ department, to do an interview. Well, what do you got? I said, tell them you looked up their history, whether it's on their website or the yearbook or whatever, and show them that you're interested in working for the, whatever fire department, and show them that you do have an interest in their history of that fire department.
No, I love it. History is it's very fascinating to see where we come. And then also sometimes history repeat itself, with some of the things, even in the fire service, smooth bores and things like that, just, tactically wise, right? We could always have that. We got 3 hour discussion on that whole topic, but, I also think too, like, it's important to ask those senior guys, in the stations, like, hey, what was this place? Why is this important? Why is that important? Whatever. What makes this place what it is? And if, take that vetted interest, in the department and seeing where it's been and where it's going.
Yeah. Cause once those guys are gone, they're gone for good, and their stories are good. I do like the departments that invite some of the retired guys, not some, but all the retired guys back. And it's a good way. Have them up for breakfast, have them up for some coffee, have them up for lunch or dinner, and have that guy that worked there back in the 70s or 60s or whatever, and have them sit around the coffee table, with those younger guys. It's so important for both of those, that guy that isn't part of the fire department anymore, it has some meaning to him. There's no doubt about it. And then the youngsters that get to hear that stories, they can learn a whole lot about what those senior guys went through back in the day when they were making $12,000 a year, and
right.
their kids were on the free meal program, up at the local grade school because we didn't have the pay and benefits that we do now,
Well, no, I think it's great. And I think too, when when those senior guys get the opportunity to tell a bit of the history and why this department means what it does, and you hear that, you feel the passion when they talk about it, right? They got 30 years at this one area or whatever. They have a passion for that job. They have a passion for that department. They want to share, what their experiences have been and all those sort of things. And so it's a great opportunity for, that. I love the aspect of, the learning the history of the organization, by the new people. So they kind of know this is where it came from. Right. And those sort of things, kind of making a transition now from the photo thing, from the training aspect, right? Like, photos are worth, they say a photo's worth 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
And so from a training aspect, I think there's nothing better than having real photos to have discussions off of, to train off of, to look at, to just, everything related to that.
Yeah, one of my favorite drill as a company officer is you can just throw that photo of a structure fire up, whether it's some light white smoke in an incipient stage of a fire, or it's a heavily involved 3-story garden apartment building, and just sit around the kitchen. It's winter time now. It's tough to get out here in St. Louis and do a lot of outdoor training at times, but you throw a photo up and just sit around and have a discussion. Hey, what would you do? What would you do if this fire goes sideways? Do we need to play catch up? Do you have the right resource coming? But to have that photo and the internet is that curse and a blessing, but, and I'm, me, man, I'm not a social media guy, but so many people say I'm missing out on so much of the fire service stuff because I'm not on social media. Well, that might be true. So if you are in the social media, use it the right way. Don't be a hater out there on social media. And we're never there, to criticize, other firefighters, especially online. Let's learn from others' mistakes. Let's learn from others' successes. I learned so much out on this trip. We'll never have an event like that in St. Louis here, but I just learned so much. And hopefully, my photos that are out there now through fire engineering, some people will be able to look at those and use them, and maybe able to use those as a training session one afternoon at the kitchen table.
Well, and I love the when I find myself too, like, most times on fires, I'm coming in a little bit later in the incident, just because of the position I'm in or whatever. But I find myself now trying to take photos, right? So if we do after actions or we have discussions, hey, this is, did you guys see this? Because sometimes in the fire service, we get this tunnel vision when we show up on scene, which is, hey, we got to do X, Y, and Z. And I appreciate that. But then to go back after and say, hey, did you see this? Did you notice the construction? Did you see the smoke conditions of the fire location or whatever it might be? And having that photo to actually recreate in their mind the event they had, but then correlate your discussion to that photo versus just saying, hey, let me draw a picture of what we had, or let me take a Google image of the building prior to, or whatever. I think it just makes it so much more effective and real for the actual people in the class. It's a win all day long, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree. And you think about some of the classes that are out there now, a go or no go class. What is that go or no go class based on? Photographs.
Yep.
Boom, pop a photo up, go or no go. And it's a whole class about those photos and what you would do. You take away the photos, there's no class.
Yeah. Well, the other caveat I would say to photos, and this is a personal thing. Don't try to be that person that, puts a bunch of photos from the internet in a class and say, you know it all, when you have been on those incidents.
Yeah.
And we've all been in those positions. And so, it's easy to go on the internet and put a bunch of pictures up and be like, what would you do? Take those photos, to Dave's point, when you're on the scenes, take, if your first do company, I get it. You're not taking photos. It's hard to do. I get all that. But, after the fire, take those pictures, take the pictures of the trusses, take the pictures of what's going on inside, share those things. To come back to the firehouse, put it into something, hey, here's the top 5 takeaways from this fire. Here's the 5 takeaways from that fire. And that way everybody in the department learns and shows from it. And you can have discussions with your crews. It just makes it so much easier and so much better than just saying, hey, this fire went X, Y, Z, Y,
Sure.
having that discussion is so critical.
Yeah, that photo I was talking to you about earlier that was hanging on the wall at the fire museum, from the 20s. I throw that up. That's one of my first slides at our class at the fire academy. And I asked the recruits, I said, tell me what the importance or the significance of this fire, this photo is. And hey, it's an old fireman, it's an old fire truck. And, I said, yeah, all good. But to me, the significance of that fire photo that somebody took almost 100 years ago was that somebody took the time to take that photo. And here we are 100 years later talking about that photo. Now, obviously, back then to take that photo, you had to have a tripod and a professional photographer. And then I pull out my phone to all the recruits. I said, everybody has one of these now. And over your next 30 years, take a lot of photos. I always throw in, don't be that social idiot, social media idiot. I said, but take a lot of photos over your career. If you're on the ambulance and you're doing what you're supposed to and you're outside and you guys get a pretty good structure fire, and if it's allowed by your department, snap some photos. And I'm sure the guys on the engine would love to see them, afterwards when they get back. Take a lot of photos of the guys in the firehouse. Take a lot of photos, of what's going on. Take a lot of pictures while you're training. I mean, I stopped by a neighboring firehouse the other day and they were showing me their hose loaded. I just didn't look at it. I got up there on that hose bed and started snapping some photos. And I took it back to our guys. We're getting ready to get a new rig. So, take a lot of photos, and, the fun photos are the ones of all the guys and everything. But the photos of the training, the ones of the structure fires, those are the ones that, everybody can really learn from.
Well, I love to take photos. I mean, because it's just, there's no reason we shouldn't be, right? Everybody's got cameras. We got all kinds of devices now. So the photos shouldn't be an issue, right? And I really, because I've been through your presentation a couple times now, and I love the fact that first photo comes up and it's a staged photo, of course, right? Because it has to be back in those days.
Sure.
But that's what was important, right? Those firefighters being in front of the truck with their, Class A uniforms that they probably purchased that were, 3,000 degree wool cloth and things. So, it's important, right? Let's not have a gap in our fire service to where we don't capture it because we don't take enough photos and we're just conversing about it versus actually being able to see it. And if we take the time to take the pictures, at the trainings, if we take the time to take the pictures at the scenes and employ the people like yourself, Dave, that are good at this stuff to capture the incidents and the events, man, it's only going to make us stronger as we learn from these things as well as document them for our own history.
Yeah, it's twofold. It's a win-win. It's, I started taking fireground photos 40 years ago. Back then it was a picture of a building on fire. Now it's history. 40 years later, all those guys at that fire, they're gone. All the rigs that were at that fire, they're gone. A lot of those buildings, they're gone. So that aspect of it is the history part of it. On your, what you're talking about with the training aspect of it, with everything out there now with technology and social media, man, we can use these photos so much better. I've got all these cool photo albums in my office here from all these ancient fires, but now you take a photo and everybody can see it. Back when I would take a photo, I'd send it into one of the magazines, and 3 months later, people would see it. Now it's instantaneous. You're listening to fires in New York and Los Angeles live. You're getting live feeds of these fires. So it's just so easy to do now and so easy to learn from what's going on in the American Fire Service through technology.
Is there any one photo in your mind that you've taken over your career that really stands out to your head?
Well, I don't know. There's one that's hanging on my wall behind me. It was right after an ice storm in St. Louis, and a lot of St. Louis was without electricity, and it was up in North St. Louis County. And one of the kids that was living in the house, they didn't have any heat except for the stove, so they had their stove heating their house. He took some paper and was playing around, and the paper lit on fire. Next thing you know, the house was on fire. And I got there pretty quick. I was out and about, and one of the firefighters, Ron Fritz, it was a real cold day too. probably 0 or 10 degrees out, and it was a good fire. Ron Fritz, one of the Normandy firefighters back then, came out and was kneeling down just to take a breather. It had just come out of the place, and it was steam. He was just covered with steam, and it's a cool photo. Actually, it won the IFF Media Awards contest.
Oh, wow.
But it's not a picture of a building on fire. There's no fire trucks in the pictures. It's just a picture of a fireman coming out after he did an incredible job in this heavily involved fire. And he was on fire, and it was cold outside, and steam was just coming off of him. So I think that's probably one of my favorite photos.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Dave, man, I can't tell you, thanks again for being with us today. I really appreciate your time and what you did out in California and what you do for the fire service and for St. Louis and the region through your training and the Muddy River Fools and the Fools International and everything else. So definitely appreciate it, man.
Cool. Thanks for having me, and keep loving the job.
Yeah. Guys, thanks again for joining us on this month's Humpday Hangout. Again, if you have not, sign up for FDIC International. Pre-conference is Monday and Tuesday. I'm going to look at my calendar, April 7th and the 8th. Great 4-hour workshops going to be up there. Some great hands-on training. Again, a lot of it's already sold out, which is crazy. But you know what? That's what happens when you wait till the last minute to try to get on board. Make sure you check out Fire Engineering and Firefighter Nation for the latest in what's going on in the fire service. Make sure you check out their Facebook page, like them on Instagram and Twitter, or X, I should say now. I'm still not caught up with all that stuff. So get out there, be safe, and we'll see you guys next month. Thanks.